So we continue today looking at Abraham, and we are going to discuss today an incident that happens in the life of Abraham with his son Isaac. In Genesis chapter 22, we have what is one of the more unsettling passages in the Old Testament. So it came to pass that God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham, take now your only son Isaac whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." So Abraham takes up fire, and he takes up wood, and he goes with Isaac on this journey. And as they're traveling, Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, "My father, look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering." And so the two of them went together. So they go up the mountain, and Abraham builds the altar, puts the wood underneath the altar, takes his son Isaac and ties him up and lays him across the altar. And just before he is about to offer him up, an angel from heaven says, "Do not lay your hand upon the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." And Abraham looks around and sees a ram. Its horns are stuck in this thicket. And he takes the ram, and he offers the ram instead of his son Isaac. So, this is again one of these important examples of typology in the Old Testament. And again, typology is persons and events of the Old Testament pointing to persons and events of the New Testament. And so, the first typology here, of course, is a father is willing to sacrifice his son. Well, the typology there is obvious, right? John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So this points to God the Father offering God the Son for our salvation. Now, the stories in the book of Genesis and elsewhere in the Old Testament are stories that were handed on initially by word of mouth. It was an oral tradition. And in Judaism and also in early Christian writings, we find that there are actually other things referenced in these stories because there is this oral tradition about these stories as well as what was written down. And so it is in the story of Abraham and Isaac that Isaac knew what was going to happen when he went with Abraham to the mountain. And then when he asks the question, "Where's the lamb?" it's rhetorical. St. Clement of Rome, in the first century, he wrote, "Isaac with confidence as knowing the future was led as a willing sacrifice." And that's important as well because, again, that's typology, that the Son is a willing sacrifice. Christ willingly ascends on the cross and offers himself for the life and for the salvation of the world. The obedience of Isaac makes sense because it reminds us that Abraham's entire lineage are people that are obedient to the will of God. Abraham's children are all those people of all nations who are obedient to God's will. Okay, I love God. What does that obedience look like? What do I have to do to follow God's will? Well, God in his mercy and love and wisdom does not just leave us to figure all that out for ourselves. God gives us a framework for how to follow his will through the common life of his people, and that's the church. So we don't have to do it sort of poking around, maybe this is God's will, maybe it isn't, but we have a systematic way laid out for us. And so everything that we do in the church, prayer, fasting, liturgy, and all of these things, God says, this is how you can carry out my will. Sometimes people will say, wow, prayer, fasting, fasting, man, stewardship, I can't do that. I mean, I just can't do that. If we can get up at 6 a.m. to be on the road to go to Indy for a sporting event, or maybe Chicago for shopping, or maybe to get out on the lake for a day of fishing, then we can be up and on the road to get to church for 10 a.m. If we can not eat anything or drink anything from midnight for a medical procedure, including our morning coffee, that proves to us that we actually have the capability of not eating or drinking anything from midnight, including our morning coffee, in order to receive the Eucharist, the medicine of immortality, and the antidote to death. If we can find the time during the day to check our various social media accounts, we do have enough time during the day for prayer and reading the Bible and all of these things. Yeah, we can. We do have the capability of doing these things. It is not a question of if we are able to follow God's will as he lays it out for us in his body, the church. If we are really honest with ourselves, it is the question of if we are willing. Are we willing to do these things? If we can do these things for the things of earth that eventually fade away into history, then we can certainly do them for God and for the things of heaven that last unto the ages of ages. Amen.